Hey guys, my name's Khadroth, and today I'm going to be talking to you about Kawakami Gensai. She's going to be the game's newest 5-star single-target limited Buster Assassin, and she's coming to us with the new Guda Guda event here in Year 10 of JP. Now, Gensai is interesting for a couple of reasons. To start off with, she is actually going to be the character that basically Batosai from Rurouni Kenshin is based off of. So we definitely see that a little bit reflective in the design, as well as nods towards Weiseki Kenshin's design in there as well. Now, Gensai is going to also be interesting for the fact that her performance is actually going to keep pace with a lot of the power creep that has happened in the Cavalry Triangle. And we'll get into that very quickly here because I'm going to need to do kind of a quicker video on this one just due to my own personal time constraints, so bear with me as we fly right through this. Start off with Gensai has 11.5k attack. This is not a bad stat, but it is always going to be a concern with someone like an assassin. But given Gensai's actual just plethora of damage sources, we really don't have to worry about this too much, though admittedly, if you don't have her skills online, her attacks will suffer a little bit. Similarly, her HP is actually probably going to be the real concern here, as she doesn't really have any sort of survivability baked into her kit. The big deal for her is going to be the fact that because she is a Buster-based assassin, you're probably going to be using her in a typical Koyanskaya and Oberon type of loadout, and that means you're probably just going to kind of automate a lot of the stuff and just try to kill things pretty much as fast as they possibly can. So the realistic issue here is going to be what happens if somebody has a particularly bad break bar effect or something, because you're not going to necessarily have the easy path to protecting her unless you're running somebody like, say, Merlin alongside. Looking at her attribute, she is man attribute. She is going to have 99 star absorption, which is pretty much right in the middle of the pack, and star generation of 25.6, which is pretty much what we can expect for an assassin. Her NP charge attack rate is actually not too terrible at 0.6, and this is actually surprising given the deck that we'll talk about here in a minute. Her NP charge defense is 4%, her death rate is 44%, which is a little bit higher than average, and her alignment is chaotic evil, giving her some synergy with units like, say, Doman. Her gender is going to be female, her traits are going to be costume-owning Hominide Servant, Humanoid, Normal Servant, Seven Knight Servant, and Weak to Enema Elish. On top of that, her deck is going to be double Buster, double Arts, and that is where the wheelhouse of her damage will kind of focus, so you can definitely expect a lot of performance on 80% of her cards. Her quick card stands alone, but its performance shouldn't be too bad given its star generation rate and the fact that pretty much all of her cards are above average in terms of their hit counts. The only exception to that is the extra attack just being average at 5. Taking a look at her skills, we can start off basically with her first one here, which is a double steroid that gives Buster and Arts up for 3 turns of 30% each, and will increase basically her power mod against man attribute enemies for 3 turns also by up to 50%. This skill, like her third skill, will also be on a 6-turn cooldown, making her pretty viable in a double Koyanskaya setup should you want to 3-turn with her. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Her second skill is going to be the one that you're definitely going to want to lore, however, as this is going to be the one that you really are going to care a little bit about the cooldowns on. This skill has a 2-turn cooldown, and what it's going to do is going to give you critical star absorption for 1 turn, which will help her soak any stars that she generates, and stars will abound quite literally in a Buster composition for most people. Plus, it will also grant her critical damage for that turn of increasing it basically up to 50%. From here, this is where things get interesting, as she gets the Sword Sheathing status for herself, and this will not be apparent as to what it's used for until we get to the Noble Phantasm, but rest assured, you will want this pretty much as often as you can get it. Due to the fact that it's only 1 turn, but the skill can be reduced down to a 2-turn cooldown, means we can pretty much get this popped just about every single turn if we did want to 3-turn with her, so this is definitely ideal. On top of this, she will also have a crit star bomb of up to 10 stars. Nothing too much to write home about, but definitely not bad considering this will just further augment other things. Her third skill is where her charge is actually going to come in, as this is going to be her 30% charge skill for her. Given the fact that she is Buster, this will make a pairing with mana loading very nice, as it'll allow you to start with a 50% starting charge CE and be very good with her. You will have also the ability to inflict skill seal to prevent enemies from kind of getting a little bit too active against her, and she will also reduce their crit damage resistance for 3 turns in a similar way to how Lilith does it, meaning that she will actually just straight up increase her crit damage against all of those enemies by up to 30%. So this is sort of another crit damage modifier. It's just going to be on the enemy rather than on her. And from there, you can also see that she will basically increase her own attack for 3 turns by 30% up, which is going to be really, really nice, given the fact that attack up is actually somewhat rare now in a lot of the Buster compositions. This will scale pretty nicely in, accordance with everything else that she will have. For her passive skills here, she has a unique presence concealment that has no actual effect. She has independent action B to just further increase her crit damage a little bit more, and magic resistance C to increase her debuff resistance by 15%. From here, looking at her append skills, the big one, like I've already mentioned, is going to be mana loading. That's the one you're really going to want to go with. Though admittedly, the 4th append for some additional critical damage and the 5th append for skill reloading, maybe to reduce the cooldown, say, of the first skill so that you can actually double stack it faster, wouldn't be a bad idea either. Looking at her Noble Phantasm, it is at 8-hit Buster single target NP. It's going to increase her own attack by 30% for 1 turn if she has Sword Sheathing status. So again, if you get the cooldown on that second skill pretty low, you can pop this every single turn for 3 turns in a row, making this quite easy for you guys to actually have and guarantee on every single Noble Phantasm. From here, she will also ignore invincibility for 1 turn and ignore defense for 1 turn, making her very difficult to stop unless you're running something like Guts or, again, just solemn defense. She will deal damage to 1 enemy, and she will deal 150% extra damage, aka super effective, damage against divine traded enemies. So that's definitely going to be good. If an enemy is either man attribute or divine traded, she will absolutely destroy them. From here, she has an overcharge effect that increases her own NP damage for 1 turn, activating before damage goes out. This will scale quite nicely, though admittedly it's not, a big deal too much. However, this will be nice and synergistic with the probable Oberon that you will be running alongside of her. So this is definitely a good thing for her to have. With regards to craft essences, I think if you're going to look at one-shot damage, obviously something like Black Grail is going to be the big one, but we can definitely look at other things like, say, Rising Mud Rain, which are, kind of a hybrid of Black Grail with Overcharge, since we know that she has a scaling Overcharge that, Oberon himself can actually magnify even further. So that could also potentially work. And if we're looking at, starting her for maybe like a 3-turn setup or just getting to an NP under her own power, that's where your 50% Cs are going to come in. She's not going to need anything with Invuln Pierce. So we're going to be looking at anything that can kind of just scale her damage really well. So you're looking at CEs like Cranking would be really strong. If not, Aerial Drive is at least permanently available in the Recollection shop right now on JP. So that would definitely make for another solid option for you. But there are plenty of other 50% starting charge Cs out there that you guys can use, so don't feel obligated to just use the ones that I'm mentioning here. From there, we also have to look at her charge scenarios. Again, like I mentioned, if you have mana loading, she should be fine, but you may want to, forsake it a little bit in the purpose of like pursuing something else. Just if you do that, understand that you will be kind of stopping your ability to maybe like 3-turn against something like a break bar boss or something like that. Either way, I definitely recommend the mana loading, but you guys can see if you run her in a double Koyanskaya Oberon setup, that's going to be basically how you get the most out of her. Now, taking a look at her raw damage numbers, this is going to be numbers that don't include things like support casters or craft essences or mystic codes. This is just her under her own power in a neutral environment. You guys can see she actually gets quite a bit of damage scaling off both the man and divine attributes there, and essentially she can double them up to get even more. Plus, if you add in Sword Sheathing for the extra 30% attack up, you're going to get a whole lot of extra damage there, and so her raw numbers are actually quite impressive due to that. If we start to look at her in an actual composition, we can see that she actually does handle these numbers still pretty favorably. That is to say, once you get her with a double Koyanskaya setup, your man attribute numbers are actually going to jump even higher than the divine super effective, and that's going to be because you're running double Koyanskaya alongside, who both can provide extra additional man power mods. So it's going to work out really well for Gensai and allow her to just really obliterate anybody that is a man attribute enemy. If they are divine, though, she still has the super effective, and that's going to be really good for her. And if they are both, she's going to be dealing even more. So definitely a nice thing. Now, these numbers do include, they're still neutral technically, not including class advantage, but they are including things like your supports and your mystic codes and stuff like that. But they're also including the sword sheathing status, which, as we already mentioned with this composition, you can get every single turn. Looking at her one-shot damage, she's actually pretty stellar there at about 534 on NP1, and that's not including her niches. So you definitely have a lot of damage potential for her, and we'll see how this stacks up against the competition. So basically, compared to King Hassan, he is absolutely just going to win outright no matter what the circumstance is. Where King Hassan will win is whenever any sort of survivability comes into play and you're in maybe more of a challenge environment. That's where King Hassan is really going to flourish, and also you do know that he does have the utility of having death procs pretty much on all of his attacks. So that is something to at least still kind of be a feather in First Hassan's hat. Next up, looking at Kama. Kama actually in a 3-turn environment slightly edges her, but in a single target environment pretty much just always wins, unless we're looking at a lot of sort of scaling on Gensai's case. So this is just due to the, pretty insane actual NP interlude that Kama got, and Kama got that basically due to Melt and the pressure that Melt was putting on the single targets, but still Gensai is not wholly left behind here. So I do think that Gensai can still be a decent pickup, especially if you're somebody that maybe doesn't like Kama or have a Kama at your disposal. On top of that, we also have Jack, and as you guys will remember, Jack got the buff to her first skill, and while this did help out her charging situation and enable her to actually be able to 3-turn, it did not really do a whole lot for her damage output. Still, she does actually do pretty solid one-shot damage, and if she is against the female niche, she can do it even better. But if Gensai has the man attribute or the divine attribute in play, she will at worst compare, if not just outright win. So this is going to be another thing there going on. And then last but not least, the elephant in the room here is going to be Melt. Melt has put a lot of pressure on the Cavalry Triangle, as I've mentioned before, and that is because she has just been kind of bonkers for damage. Now, she is a 1.5 times modifier, so if you look at, say, her 3-turn damage there, that wave 3 number is actually only going to be about 900k. If you were to go back to Gensai's and double up her wave 3 number, since she would get 2 times instead of 1.5 times, you are looking at even more than 900k. So Gensai actually would beat her in a 3-turn environment, and even more so with the niches in play. In terms of one-shot damage, Melt will slightly win this one. However, if you start factoring in Gensai's niches, then Gensai will win. So this is actually really good, as this does mean that Gensai can still hold up against Melt, but obviously Melt's going to have things like buff strip and survivability in her kit that Gensai is not going to have. So again, at the end of the day, I think Gensai does actually compare pretty favorably with just about everybody, if not at least being competitive, like in the case of Kama. So let me know what you guys think about Gensai. Which is your favorite Ascension, and do you plan to roll for Gensai? I'll be curious to hear you guys' thoughts. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys for the next one. Hey, if you liked the video, make sure to like and subscribe, right?